I think that was a good point to add. You can absolutely be racist if you have a Black or brown child. Like, I don't know who told you that, but that is not true.
I don't know where they got that concept, but it's fine. It's fine. The whole proximity is not osmosis. Like, you don't become anti-racist by proximity. Mm-hmm. You have to do the internalized work yourself.
Yeah. Hello, how is it going?
Hi, are you ready to talk about these two chapters? Because I was reading them and I was like looking at my iPad just going,
Yes, these are good chapters. I'm looking forward to discussing them.
And we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger this week.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Like, every time we go through a new chapter, I'm just like, I still can't believe how relevant it is, considering how recently it was published. Yeah. 1 and 2, he must have cranked this out fast.
Yeah. Yeah,
like,
I think this, go ahead.
It's just, we've been talking about this stuff, and this stuff is still like, so it's not even like, oh, you know, racism as tale as old as time type of a situation. We're talking about very specific instances that have happened in modern day culture. Mm-hmm. And he mentions them.
Yeah. And then he did the video series. I think this is in response to the video series. So I don't know how he did it. I don't think he slept for some time.
Like, writing a book's hard. Mm-hmm. I write articles for my day job, and it's hard just to crank out 200 words.
Yeah, it takes me back to those college application days and like scholarship days where you had to be 250 words or like 500 words. It's quite difficult.
First of all, I don't know how previous generations were able to be educated without Microsoft Word and being able to see the word count when people would be like 1,000-word essays. I'm just like, they sat there and counted each word.
I don't know how they did it either. I look for it in everything that I do. It's like, where's the word count? Oh, there's no word count. Let me go to Google.
How did we graduate?
It's a mystery.
Someone gave us master's degrees. We may never know. We never know. But oh my goodness. Alrighty. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's start with the first one.
Here's the question. If there is a hairstyle or style in general that someone thinks is beautiful and wants to try out, but it's mainly seen in Black women / men or other, could have put that there. That's just my little or other. When it's important. When is it not cultural appropriation? Mm-hmm. You want to take a first stab at this one?
I just had a question, and he addresses it. Well, he addresses it later, but I'm curious what you think. Can cultural appropriation only be white people? Can only white people culturally appropriate?
Ooh. So the first thing that comes to my mind is whenever I spent my year after college graduation abroad. I was working in South America, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was attending like local school pageants and stuff like that. And there was a time when they dressed the kids up in literal like kimonos. Mm-hmm. Like kimonos, put chopsticks in their hair, did really exaggerated makeup,
Mm.
and they performed a little song and dance that I'm not even sure was like of Asian origin.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there thinking, there's a lot of layers to this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of layers, because I am sitting in a country that was colonized
Mm-hmm.
with a like very colorist white dominated education, because it came from like their education system was based on other colonizer education systems,
Mm-hmm.
and they are dressing children up as almost Asian caricatures,
Mm-hmm.
which I was just like, don't know how I feel about that as an Asian. Don't know how I feel
Right.
about that as someone who is currently a guest in this country.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of layers.
That's what I was asking, because I feel like this, depending on what people think, could fall under the white savior complex similarity in the sense, like in the sense that it could be like Western. You don't have to be white to have that white savior complex. So I'm curious, can that be expanded to cultural appropriation?
Like, I have no clue. I like, just many thoughts, many feelings, a lot of, it's like trying to get ornament hooks for your Christmas tree untangled. You know how there's that giant ball?
Yeah.
Whenever you pull them out of the attic or whatever, and there's a giant ball of ornament hooks, and you're just like, I don't want to do this. That's what I feel about cultural appropriation, honestly.
Right.
Like untangle it, it's like untangling Christmas lights.
You set a very vivid picture. I appreciate that.
um but it's necessary work, and the reward
Mhm.
is you get Christmas lights. That's probably not the best example or metaphor ever, but that's just the one that came to my head.
Right. I think it's accurate. It's certainly a lot of work. And it's, I mean, I'm glad this question's in here because it certainly is something that I struggle with in terms of what's appropriate, what's not. Um, to answer your original question of if there's anything that, other than my very interesting question that I started this conversation with,
Mm-hmm.
I, I thought you did a really good job explaining it. It's really about your understanding of the culture that you are taking something from. Are you giving them credit? Are you taking the credit for yourself? Are you giving it to someone who isn't deserving of the credit? I think that was a good way to break it down. That's a good standard policy to follow when talking about cultural appropriation.
Like, and a cultural appropriation feels like such an easy slippery slope to fall into, pitfall. But also B, we have the internet.
Mm-hmm.
We have the internet. We have technology, which is not saying that like everyone, like the internet's readily available to everyone. Equitable internet for everyone. Anyways, but we do have a lot more access as a general population than we did maybe 15 years ago, and we can look up things.
Yes.
But we have to put in the work. And it brings me to the next thing that I was going to ask you.
Okay.
Do you think celebrity culture has, and the focus on celebrity culture has influenced influencers has influenced cultural appropriation and made it worse, like exacerbated it?
Mm.
Because Acho also goes into the history of cultural appropriation and the whole viral look trending, that wasn't necessarily as like quick and easy to circulate back then. So do you think from our context, American celebrity culture has exacerbated cultural appropriation?
That's a fantastic question. I think there are at least two different sides. I think when we're talking about celebrity culture, we're talking about like you said, trends and wanting to be in the forefront of conversations, wanting to be like the it person, wanting to be who everyone wants to be. And in so many ways, there's so many toxic things about our celebrity culture right now. And I thinking about it, I do think there's certainly some form of correlation, because if you want like the next thing, you want to be the forefront of whatever you want to be in the front of whatever the next wave is, then I could see it being really easy to just claim response, like just think of an idea, think you're the first person to think of it, and then take credit for it, and then do no research, and then somebody sees a picture and they're like, oh, actually that comes from my culture, you didn't say anything about us, that's culture appropriation, that's messed up, because it is. So I think it circles back to the importance of knowing history and I like doing your research, which I think is huge, and I don't think there's a huge emphasis, or I'm not a celebrity, so maybe there's something I don't know, but from what I see, there's not really a big emphasis on going and learning about the history. I think in specifically music, I hear a lot of musicians, and this is just like a train of thought, so just like bear with me.
No, I'm following it. You followed mine, so I am following. I'm here for you. I'm loving this.
In music specifically, I hear a lot of musicians talking about, okay, and like I listen to this artist and this legend, and they reference history a lot. And then in their music, they're definitely very cautious for the most part to attribute whatever traits they got from past musicians. But I don't see that a lot when we're talking about celebrity culture. I'm thinking about people who are trending on Twitter, or like Instagram models or influencers. I don't see a emphasis to make sure you go back and really cite where you get your ideas, your creativity, your sources from, because you want so badly to be unique. So a long way to say, yes, I definitely think there's some influence, and I think there's something between celebrity culture and cultural appropriation.
Oof. I loved that answer. I also love how what's hilarious about this chapter is he specifically references the Kardashians, because they are like
Yes.
really bad at cultural appropriation. Like they are repeating, they have not learned their lesson, because like whenever I read Kim Kardashian in here, I was like, oh, was it the kimono incident? No, it was not the kimono incident.
No, it was not.
It was another one.
And he mentions too, aside from not even mentioning that incident,
I don't even know when the kimono incident happened. Did it happen before or after this book was published? See, there's so many, we can't even keep up.
I definitely think that's a point of emphasis, specifically when we're talking about Kim Kardashian, the fact that this continues to happen. I think the first time is not acceptable for sure, but if you notice a pattern of culture appropriation, then it's like, you're not even doing anything to try to do better.
Like, she literally tried to trademark the word kimono. Just
all the people that decision had to go through. And no one thought, this is inappropriate. Would you like to give some insight for people who don't know what we're talking about?
Go Google Kim Kardashian kimono incident. But basically, she came out with some shapewear, which shapewear I have my own opinions on in and of itself. But she decided to name it Kimono after herself. and she tried to trademark the word kimono, which, for those of you that might not know this, don't quote me on this because I am not Japanese and I don't pretend to be an expert in culture, but a kimono is a traditional Japanese garment. So it's been around for like hundreds of years, and she just tried to trademark it.
Yeah. So strike one.
That was like strike like 4 with her whenever
Yeah.
it comes to cultural appropriation. Do you want to talk about what's actually mentioned in the book for the people that are like reading along with us? Because they mention braids, hairstyle, and then what was the second one? I'm looking for it.
I know, me too.
Specifically Kim Kardashian. And just also for the record, I'm not a fan of Kim Kardashian after what her and Kanye did to Taylor Swift, because I love Taylor Swift.
I do love Taylor.
So I'm on Team Taylor. Sorry, I'm also not sorry, because Taylor's been problematic sometimes in her own way. Speaking of appropriation, didn't someone say that Taylor Swift tried to like appropriate twerking
I haven't heard that
in her
but...
Shake It Off music video?
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was the way that she styled herself during the Shake It Off music video.
What did she do? I didn't watch it.
I'll send you pictures. And then most recently, if we're discussing celebrity sightings here, Ariana Grande got in hot water for doing Asian inspired makeup.
Interesting.
So discussions that I usually have with my white family members, and the kind of questions that they'd ask is where does it stop? Where is the line? Where is the line? Because they were like, it's just makeup. And I was just like, this is interesting. This is very interesting.
I think that's a specific example where it's so easily avoidable, because all she has to do is say, my makeup was inspired by this culture.
I think it was K-pop inspired.
I mean, just say that. Give them the credit. Crisis avoided. Perfect.
Crisis avoided. Like, I think I've also, don't quote me on this one either, but in terms of Asian spaces, I think I've also seen some like people talking about specifically trying to make their eyes monolids, like the illusion of a monolid. And as someone with a monolid, like that, I have been mocked for having like eyes that look like this before. And if someone were to try to do that for likes,
right,
and they can just as easily like wipe the makeup off, but I'm stuck with the way my face looks, that would really piss me off.
Right. And that's definitely something I think he discusses, just how it's for likes. No, he definitely doesn't discuss it. I don't know where I heard that from, but it's for likes, and you can walk away. It's not a part of your character. It's not like who you are. It's not something you could just walk away from. Oh, I think he talks about something else that's going to come to my mind soon.
Was it the part about blackface?
It's is it? It's possible. Just in terms of, oh no, when he says that it's like, maybe this has nothing to do with that. These thoughts are coming to me as I'm currently speaking, which is fantastic. He talks about how you wear the outfits, you wear the makeup, but it's all aesthetics. You don't actually stand behind the people and who are being oppressed for certain things. It's so fake.
Yeah, like the reason I brought up blackface was because there is a section in this chapter specifically about blackface. Blackface is wrong, people. Just putting that right there. Just don't go near it. Just turn the other way. Same for yellowface. Like, yeah, I don't even like the word yellow face, but also just no.
Just it's a no. Just consistently not what you want.
Don't do it, people. Just don't do it.
It's just always wrong. Can we say this any clearer?
The year is 2022. I know you love breakfast at Tiffany's. I have seen the Tiffany's on Fifth Avenue and I've wanted to eat a bagel out in front of it. Yeah, cool. I don't get the movie, but also Mickey Rooney's character. Don't do it, y'all. Just don't do it.
Because he talks about it in the context of a costume, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just no.
Like, it just like blows my mind that people are still questioning this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Come
on. Something that seems so straightforward. And we are telling you just so directly, don't do it.
I hate it when people ask why. I hate it whenever I will get on a rant about like why yellow face is not great, why I don't want to see someone just pulling their eyes to the side of their faces for a joke, why I don't want to see like that, anything like that. And then someone just goes, oh, it's just a joke. Why? Well, it's just a joke to you, but like I said, this is my face.
Right.
Can't do anything with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so inappropriate. And I mean, I think two things. One, I am thankful because now with the podcast and us like talking about these things, I have something to say, because before I would just get mad and I'd be like all super like flustered and just like yelling, but not getting any point across because I'm so mad because you should just know it's wrong. Now I have words, you know, I have vocabulary. It's fantastic. But also there's just certain things that you're just going to have to look up for yourself. I don't want to have to tell you why blackface or yellowface is wrong. And if you don't understand, I'm not the person to ask.
Like, it goes even further. It can go even further than that. It can go into like sports team mascots. That was another thing that was mentioned. Sports teams mascots. Yes. Like old-timey cartoons. Mm-hmm. Like, it always goes to, how do I put this not delicately? It always goes to entertaining the white person.
Yes.
Not gonna be delicate. Sorry.
I appreciate that you said, how is the least delicate? You know, like intentionally, how can I really hammer this? I think that's what it takes though. I mean, we've tried to be nice, you know, but all this stuff is harmful. As we kind of mentioned last week, it's like, it's harming people. And so me being nicely and helping you and being accommodating to you is actually like hurting me. Nothing's happening to you.
You're the one that's doing the emotional labor for someone just to be like, just to play the devil's advocate. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna ask this wildly inappropriate question and then not compensate you for your emotional labor. No one compensates anyone for emotional labor. I think that everyone should be compensated with universal basic income for emotional labor, specifically like people of color. But that's just me.
I think that is a well thought out logical argument.
Vote for Hannah in 2030, whatever. Oh yeah, I can't be president. I wasn't born here. It's fine. We've gotten so off track.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. Cultural appropriation. It's everywhere and it's so inappropriate.
It's everywhere. It spans all walks of life. Mm-hmm. Like, literally anywhere that anyone can get their hands on something from another culture. And I also think that globalization did a lot of that too.
Yeah.
Definitely globalization has both helped and hindered the concept of cultural appropriation, but I feel like it's very recent. and by recent, I mean our lifetime, that people started actually calling it out.
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
It feels like this is a part of unlearning. And so it's so ingrained. I mean, you think about colonization and you think about like people's humanity being taken away from them by colonizers. And so you were never, it's not like in the basis specifically like of our country to respect Black, Brown, Indigenous, how am I there's a word, but like those populations that are underserved, that's what I was trying to say. And so now with people having autonomy over how they identify and their racial groups and their ethnicity groups and their religious groups, and now so people can say, actually, that's really inappropriate and that's really hurtful that you do that. And so we're having to unlearn what was just the foundation of our country, the foundation of our culture, because there never was respect for those groups in the first place.
I think one of the most insulting things is for someone to not only make almost a mockery, a caricature, a joke out of another person's culture and completely erase the oppression that that joke represents, but the fact that people can make money off of it.
Yep.
It's like, just, you might as well, like, what even? You're already ignoring all of the pain, the oppression, literal deaths and genocide that has happened over like these identities, but you are making a mockery over it and you are making money off of it.
Yeah. And then specifically in our culture, because you make money off of it, then the end justifies the means. So all of that. But if you have no morals, or if you live in a capitalist society, which lucky us, we do, then it's all overlooked because they make money off of it.
It's fine. We're all fine.
Just in case you're not clear, we are not fans of capitalism.
We're not fine. Oh, see, the last time I told my parents that I wasn't a fan of capitalism, they automatically just went the opposite direction and low-key called me a communist, which is also a little racist in its own way.
Like, what are you trying to say, parent?
It's like, we're fine. This is fine.
Yes, it is a mess. And so I'm again very grateful for his definition, because I think that's a really good blueprint to work off. If you don't know the history behind it, just look into it. If you don't know where it comes from, look into it. It's better safe. You don't want to offend someone you never want to offend someone, but you certainly don't want to do it unintentionally.
And you don't want to make profit off of it either.
Yeah.
Like, seriously. So that's fun. So cultural appropriation. From the basics of I'm going to offend everyone to I'm going to make profit off of centuries of oppression of other people. How evil are you on a scale of 1 to that?
Yeah. Can you think of any examples where profit was made off of cultural appropriation?
Well, I already mentioned Breakfast at Tiffany's. The book specifically mentions the like back in the day, white actor named Thomas Daddy Rice, in the 1830s, had a bright idea to create a character called Jim Crow. Yeah, I don't even think that needs much more explanation on how wrong that is.
Right.
But this is also pre-Civil War era, so like,
yeah, I did not know that. I did not know that's where Jim Crow came from. A play of some white actor mocking Black people and their pain caused by white people. But okay. And then it becomes Jim Crow, and we are still dealing with the consequences of that.
It's fine. People think that Jim Crow is long gone, and I was just like, yeah, no. Civil rights movement happened while my dad was in high school, but thanks, y'all. Like one generation removed.
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Did you ever hear the critique on the Disney movie Dumbo?
No.
People, I'll have to look it up, but there were claims that there are 4 literal crows in that movie that are characters, and they said that those characters are based on really offensive Black stereotypes and the fact that they're also crows.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like, what year did Dumbo come out? I want to say 1930.
I can look it up.
I love the internet. See, people, this is why it's so nice that we live in the year 2022, and yet we are still dealing with this.
1941.
41. Okay, I was close. Yeah. I mean, circuses also have their own, like, very problematic history too. Yeah. You would think that it was all issues with animal rights, but no. P.T. Barnum apparently first exhibit, P.T. Barnum being the guy that was known as the father of the circus. His first exhibit was actually, I think it was a slave.
Wow.
That he claimed was like over like 800 years old or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure like that was like one of his first exhibits. Literally kept a human in a cage.
Yeah.
The Greatest Show is a cute movie though. Not accurate, but
not at all. It's all a tangled up mess. Just all of it.
So much of it is. And like I mentioned earlier, like, questions that I've gotten from my white family members is, where do I personally draw the line? Like, what am I personally offended at? Which I find a very hard thing to answer, because I'm just like,
yeah,
because my level of offense and understanding and empathy and compassion might be different from someone else's. And collectively, where do we stand with that?
Yeah, that's a really hard, that's a really difficult even position. I mean, I think that specifically goes back to how no one person can represent their whole race or their whole gender. What I'm offended by is very different from what some other Black woman is offended by, but that doesn't make either of them less true or valid. Yeah, so I won't ask you how you respond to that question.
I just kind of stare at them at this point, because like, apparently being the oldest child in my family that is a transracial adoptee, I'm the default, I'm the guinea pig. So it's not like they try to push the boundaries. They literally like come with open hearts and minds and questions. But sometimes I'm also just like, I'm not feeling this right now.
Yeah. I'm glad I think that's something that Emmanuel Acho gets to too. It's like, they're not bad questions to ask, but then it's also on us, and we can say, I just don't feel like answering that. Neither of them are bad. They're both with the best intentions, and they're both what's best, but they're both valid. You can totally ask questions, and I can totally have the right to say, I don't want to answer that.
It's true. Sometimes like, I wish that we could have just these little FAQ cards that we can just pass out to people. Like my mom used to, okay, I was a very peculiar child. I wanted, so at this one restaurant, whenever I was little, I wanted cheese and enchiladas, but I
Okay.
didn't want them in a corn tortilla. I wanted them in a flour tortilla because I didn't like corn tortillas. Wanted them in a flour tortilla. I wanted grated cheese, not queso. I didn't want beans touching it. And I wanted it all on a pink plate. Had to be a pink plate.
That is, I'm just curious how that even got started.
I don't even know. My mom had a laminated card because we would eat at this restaurant every week.
Mm.
We just hand it to the waitress. I wish we could do that with racism.
And so that would that certainly would be handy. It's like, I don't even have to answer. Here you go.
Yeah. Frequently asked questions. Black face, yellow face, any other face? No.
No.
Just no. Just stop it right there.
All caps, bold. No.
No ifs, ands, or buts. It's just bad.
Yes.
Like it almost feels like a very all or nothing position that you have to be on.
Mm.
Just like we all agree at this point, like slavery bad. Just no justifying it. No, don't go there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it took us like however many years to get here, and there are still school curriculums that don't teach that. There are still state laws being proposed, not passed, looking at you, Florida, that are trying to center white feelings whenever it comes to race education, critical race theory, actual history being taught in schools. Once again, Florida, come on.
I think this is a perfect segue into the next chapter, where I'm assuming a white reader goes into this whole thing about how every single this person of color they encounter. I mean, we could read the question again, but it's like a paragraph question.
Oh, I'm gonna do it because I want both of us to be in the all right, cracks knuckles, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Headspace. Go
for it. Just so everybody's aware, it's a long question. Bear with us.
And I have a funny story, not a funny story, but also kind of a funny story, depending on how you take it, but where a very similar question was asked to me one time.
Wow.
But these questions must be common enough for him to be answering these in a book. So
for sure.
I have unfortunately encountered many Black people who seem hell-bent on hanging the history of slavery and racism and inequality around every single white person's neck, who are unwilling to give grace if we ask questions to try to understand how we can be better. They are angry, and I'm not saying it isn't justified. Anger is a form of grief, and it's allowed to a degree within the law. But if we all genuinely want to move forward, this is an obvious problem. Question posed by Amy. Well, Amy. Amy.
Oh my gosh. Just like the tone of the question, which is like in itself a paragraph, is so problematic to me.
Did I read it well like a white person? Did I sound like an Amy whenever I read it?
I think so. I think you did a solid job. Oh my gosh. Like, where do you even begin?
Like, I guess like my question for you is, okay, pretend I'm Amy. I just asked you this question. What's your initial reaction before we even delve into the chapter? What is your answer? I could also word it how it was posed to me one time. This was the summer before we started grad school. Someone literally asked me, why are Black people still mad about slavery? It was like over like hundreds of years ago. Like, they need to get over it. And I just think that they need to get over it. Yeah, we were at a museum, and if it wasn't for the fact that we were at a museum, I would have started screaming.
I think the silence that both of us had was just like, wow, what did you say? Do you remember?
Yeah, I kind of went off on that person. I got so heated that I had to take a lap. I had to take a lap, and I was just like, yeah, I just was like, the amount of privilege that is just dripping from a question posed like that. Like, the amount of entitlement that I feel out of this question from Amy, saying that anger is a form of grief and it's allowed to a degree within the law. Yeah. Oh my Lord.
The law, within the law.
It is allowed to a degree. Like, you... At what point are you trying to tone police an entire race of people that much?
For something traumatic that has affected generations of Black people. But you can tell me that I'm overreacting.
And just the whole casualness of, oh, it happened hundreds of years ago. Get over it.
I'm glad that he answered this question and I got to read his response, because I would absolutely be livid. Still am livid, but now I have a better response. I think Acho, he says, please grant Black people the right to the full gamut of emotions regarding their wounds. I think it's just, I think that's the best response. Like, you can't tell people how they should respond to something as traumatic as being the descendants of slaves. You just can't do it. People are still mad. You just have to deal with that. I will say that whenever somebody like makes a joke about me, not racist jokes are not cool. But if somebody like makes a joke about like how I don't answer my phone immediately or something like that, I'm like, I deserve that, right? So I feel like it would be fantastic if white people would get on board with that kind of vibe and be like, we deserve that.
We were talking about this yesterday about how like sometimes I get so angry that I want to go axe throwing, and I have like so much pent up anger about it. Like, seeing questions like this just enrages me.
Yeah.
Like, also like this and I always feel like this may or may not come from white people, but whenever they start comparing trauma, like racial trauma between different races. Like, when someone told me one time that, oh, Asians don't experience racism like because they weren't enslaved, and I was like, yeah, they experienced other forms of racism, but guess what? It's all racism.
Yeah, we've definitely discussed this and how there is no, yeah, that's bad, but there's none of that. Racism is racism, and it's all poison, and it's all bad. There are no levels. Well, this is like the most extreme racism, and this is the least amount of racism. And even that like is so problematic within, I would say, like people of color community, you know, just understanding that if somebody is oppressed, we are all oppressed. That is it.
I think like Emmanuel Acho does such a great job with saying, yeah, people are angry. Let them be angry. I think as a culture, as Americans, like, we definitely err on the side of, okay, anger is inappropriate, so we're going to squish it down. But my own personal philosophy is like, if humans are able to feel anger, like, if that is a range of that is an emotion that we are given and created with, by all means, let's use it. As long as it doesn't hurt any other people. Like, I can go and throw axes until I tire myself out.
Yeah.
It only hurts the wooden target. Like, and like, people, because anger can be dangerous whenever it's like directed at another being, for sure. Like, anger, though, is a valid emotion. It's just whenever anger is not properly channeled, it's whenever anger and grief are not like, I think that's what Amy was trying to say, but she ended up saying it as, oh, you're allowed to have a degree of anger.
And even within that, just like the understanding of there's like a societal understanding of what people can and cannot be angry about. That in itself is oppressive. I remember when they were talking about how protesting and looting, when they were the Black Lives Matter protests, they were saying like that was inappropriate. That's not how you protest against injustice. That in itself, saying that my form of protest is not appropriate, is oppressive.
And that's great coming from, like, that is just great. By great, I mean like very sarcastically great, of people who like most arguments, whenever I would hear someone saying, oh, the Black Lives Matter protests are not appropriate. You want to talk about inappropriate? I point to you January 6th, 2021. People.
Yes. But I mean, I don't hear any backlash about people who, how do I want to say this? There's just, even within like the insurrection, like there's an understanding of what to be angry about. I just feel like there's so much more empathy for those people who completely did something that was actually really inappropriate and really dangerous versus people who are protesting because their lives matter.
The way that I love how this chapter just kind of builds onto the concept of implicit biases, because Acho goes on to explain or to show an illustration of two instances of men getting arrested, and the white guy beats the cop with his own like baton and like is able to be taken into custody very like passively later, I guess. Whereas the other man was shot twice while running away in the back. I think it also goes to extend to like there was a school shooter, and it was a white teenager, but he was taken into custody without problem. Whereas we have like literal children like Tamir Rice, who literally didn't do anything and was already shot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He does a really good job of like breaking down all of this. He just talks about how when the color of your skin already makes you perceived as dangerous, you're already like 50 million steps behind. Because I mean, there's literally nothing less dangerous than for the cop than running away from a cop. The guy was running away from the cop, was in no way in danger, and yet he's the one with shots in his back when the man who literally beat a cop was taken into custody with no shots in his back.
Yeah.
You know, after inflicting damage. I'm not saying like that's the way it should be, but it's interesting that someone who literally did no damage ended up with like the more severe of the consequences when someone who actually did damage walked away with nothing.
Like it just the whole point of implicit bias and anti-bias training is to make sure that people recognize their biases. Right. Where like we have so much pushback against this whole like way of critically thinking and self-reflection of like, okay, like just the scenario that that Acho even puts at the beginning of this chapter, where it's like, okay, this is a white person walking down an alleyway and they see 3 black kids, like, and they're perceived as dangerous. Like,
yeah. And there's just so much work to be done there. If you like recognize your bias and you're like, oh, okay, wow, this is what I think, then you can act on that. But if you don't even think to uncover what it is that you unconsciously think about people, then there's nothing you would do because you have no idea.
If racial bias is your default, like you have to literally rewire your brain.
Yes.
And it is very hard to do. On the other side of that, we have people like Amy Cooper, who I'm mentioning again because we already mentioned her earlier. But guess what? Acho mentioned her.
He did. Okay, first of all, we were talking about the same thing. I didn't realize we weren't. We were talking about 2 separate instances. But also when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, we already talked about her.
We already talked about Amy Cooper. And then there was Backyard Becky, too, who was the white woman that called the cops on like an 8-year-old selling water.
Because she didn't have a permit. Are we serious? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I remember watching a video where a black woman went to some white kids selling lemonade, and she was just like, oh, you don't have your permit, like I need to see your permit, just giving them a hard time. And the girls, they just got so flustered, and she was like, oh, I'm just kidding, let me buy one. And it's just like, how ridiculous is it? Like, if it's ridiculous for white kids, it's ridiculous for every single race of kid.
These are grown-ups. These are adults, and I'm like, I make stupid choices. Like, I have credit card debt. I'm not great at thinking things through as a 20-something-year-old, but at the same time, these are people who have years on me, and they're calling cops on 8-year-olds.
Yeah.
And then they have the audacity to say that our anger is not justified.
Yeah, and I mean, that's all on them. There's nothing we can do about that, which is the scary part, because they're not going to do the work. Backyard Becky, I bet, has no idea why what she did was inappropriate.
No. Backyard Becky, at least Amy Cooper, like, oh gosh, you know, like, I'm going to send you all the links later, because I can't remember which news outlet it was, but they went in on Amy Cooper and it was hilarious.
Wow. I feel like we need more of that, though. We just need more accountability. It's like, because if people aren't going to see it, then I think at least the societal understanding that this is not okay is major.
And like, these are just instances that we're talking about that got caught on camera.
Right.
The kind of microaggressions and horrible biases and the times that cops are called on like really like inappropriate situations. Like, come on.
Yeah.
we know there's more out there. These are just the few that we can name because they're seared into our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And they're seared into our minds. And you and me, we're actively talking about race like every week. Whereas like Backyard Becky over here is probably going like, I wonder if I'm on a podcast right now.
Or maybe it's those like tears where it's like, oh, everybody hates me, but like completely oblivious to why. Because I think that's a little other scary thing. Like, people who don't want to talk about race and don't want to talk about racism, they're not going to listen to podcasts. They're not going to read books. They're not going to listen to lectures. They're just going to stay in their racist circles. And that's so concerning because like, they're the ones who need to be hearing all of this.
Unfortunately, I think that time is a factor here.
For sure.
Whereas like things will get better as we progress, but I'm also a very impatient human being and I want people to be aware now.
Mm-hmm. It feels like it's been long enough to where that's like where it makes sense. You know, we're 2022. I mean, so much has happened that you would hope that with that progress comes understanding your bias and treating all humans with dignity and just understanding what subconsciously you think. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
It isn't. Like, members of my family, see what I did there this time? I was actually,
you did a good job.
Yeah, thanks. Members of my family ask me for patience all the time because, well, first of all, I do kind of have an explosive personality, so that's on me. But like, they ask me for patience and for grace when I'm sitting here thinking, y'all have had like 20 some odd years to like think about this kind of stuff. And you're just now thinking about it because it impacts you specifically.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that there's certainly got to be a place for like white people. And there are places for white people checking white people and really helping each other out, understanding. So then that way they don't have to come to us with every single question. Because it is exhausting and it is not the job that I signed up for. I just want to live my life. So, you know, those support groups. And I don't know if this is understood. Like, I don't want every time I talk to you, not you, because, this podcast, but in general, every time I talk to somebody, for us to like somehow get to race and racism, like, I appreciate that you understand. I appreciate that you're trying, but like, you don't have to share that with me all the time.
Exactly.
So we do need these, and they're so important, these spaces where like white people can get together and talk about what they don't understand, and they can complain and do stuff with themselves. Don't bring that here.
What was it? Was it a professor or someone that was just like, white people come get your people?
Yes.
That told us that?
Was it? Oh, it was, wasn't it Will?
I think so.
It was Will. It was him.
Yes. Will.
And he's a perfect example. I wish you guys all knew Will. He is fantastic. He's a perfect example of white people helping white people understand and like doing that work internally, so we don't have to always be a resource.
There was also a I forgot where I saw it, but I think there's like a Facebook group or some sort of coalition of white people that if you tag them, they will automatically come get the racist. It's the funniest thing, but also just amazing. We're like, this podcast is not here to crap on white people.
No,
white people can do some amazing things whenever they put their minds to it. Unfortunately, historically speaking, they've put their minds to not great things.
Right. It's all of that. Yeah. As hard as it may be, this is not a we hate white people space. That's not the intention. That's not the energy. That's not the vibe.
welcome that whole discord. And I like to think that whenever adoptive parents of transracial adoptees, especially whenever they say, I can't be racist, my kid is X, Y, and Z, I would like to flip that and say, I can't hate white people, my parents are white.
I think now's a good point to add. You can absolutely be racist if you have a Black or brown child. Like, I don't know who told you that, but that is not true.
I don't know where they got that concept, but it's fine. It's fine. The whole proximity is not osmosis. Like, you don't become anti-racist by proximity. You have to do the internalized work yourself.
Yes. Right there. I think that's everything I've been trying to say.
Yeah. You ready for next chapter?
I think I read the question and it made me roll my eyes.
Oh yeah. I feel like every time I read one of these questions, I'm just gonna keep getting angry, which is justified. All right. Question number 1 for next week. Why do I have to bleep myself when I'm singing in my car to a Black authored song? Why can't I quote the lyrics or even sing the music that Black artists themselves sell in the public domain?
Yep, that's the one I roll my eyes to.
I think we both know where that is going. And I have some fun stories about that. And then we get to part 2 that says us and them. And the question is, what systems are racist that need to be changed now? I have heard arguments about things related to housing and schools not being as well funded, which both seem to be more economic issues than race issues. How I can see how in the past, the now grandparent generation may have suffered from racism under redlining and other practices that are now illegal. I also see how that can have lingering effects. However, I see those racist issues as having been dealt with.
Racism doesn't exist anymore. That's what I heard.
If I kick you in the shin, it's still gonna hurt 5 minutes later.
I look forward to discussing, kinda. I don't know. I don't like how either of these questions are starting, but look forward to discussing.
It's gonna be great. Well, thank you for joining me, as always.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.